I know once you're fully burnt out, it's just so hard to get back into your swing. And when I say burnt out, for me, it's lack of motivation, life losing its color. And I just never want to go to those places again. So although it happened that way, the big crash moment, it's made me mindful moving forward and whatever I do to just be kinder to myself and, choose me.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily, bringing the conversation about death out of the shadows and into the mainstream. Because along with birth and change, if there's one thing that's going to happen to us all, then death is it. And we're going to explore how death actually shows up for us on the daily in a multitude of ways, and how when we allow ourselves to accept and to be with death, how it can teach us a whole heap about how to live this life well. You know, the thing about life is we cannot avoid change. Along with birth and death, we navigate many big and little endings and thresholds, including in our careers. But what if your career is something you've dreamt of since you were just 10 years old? That saw you scale to the heights and becoming an Olympic medal winner? A career that was a huge part of your identity for decades and bringing with it a jet-setting, high-action lifestyle. What happens when inevitably one day that all just ends? I'm joined today by Marilyn Okoro, a retired professional athlete who represented Team GB for 16 years, got bronze medals at the Olympics, World Championships, and World Athletics Finals. And with every ending comes a new beginning. And after her retirement, she's now a non-executive director on the board of UK Athletics and England Athletics. Plus, she's a mentor and public speaker, as well as blazing her path in corporate working for Equinix. And her journey through this ending and new beginnings, much like many of us, myself included when I left F1, has brought up a lot for her. And Marilyn's journey is so inspiring, not just in her ascent as a medal-winning Olympian, but also in the belief, grace, compassion, and awareness that she brings as she navigates her life beyond athletics. So, Marilyn, welcome to Death on the Daily.
Oh, Daniel, thank you so much. I love the title, by the way. I can't wait. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Marilyn. I'm really excited as well to hear about your Death on the Dailies. And actually, let's root immediately into them. But we're obviously going to focus on endings and transition in life. However, we obviously need to root into your story in order to get to that point. And you've had a celebrated and decorated international athletics career, as well as new beginnings in corporate beyond that. So I'd just love to hear anything that you want to share about your journey of how you got to where we are today.
Goodness, how
Big
long
question.
have we got? Yeah. I mean, I always love to, go back to the beginning, memory lane. And I'm just a girl from the council estate that ended up running in massive stadiums. I'm someone that has always dreamt audaciously big and taken the, equally big leaps, whether I knew it or not. I'm someone when I have a goal or I see something, I just believe that I can achieve it as well. And I think that's rooted in how I started because I always say I was fueled by no a lot. And although now I'm in a season where I need to learn to say no and put the boundaries in place, but I grew up in Northwest London, Stonebridge to be precise, single parent home, Nigerian background. And so, there's a lot of odds against you. There's a lot of expectations heaped on your shoulders. I'm the eldest daughter. And, affirmation was not something I grew up with a lot of. So I would seek to affirm myself through what I could do. And a lot of that naturally came through my accomplishments, my achievements. I guess I'm 10 years old. There's the big kind of first turning point in my life where I left Northwest London. I went to a boarding school, which was a world away from what I knew. But I call it the playground of opportunities. And I just loved it. I was cherished. I was loved by the community. And I have some great friends that I'm still friends with to today. My teachers supported me, and I met someone very, very special in my life, my very first athletics coach, who was so much more than a coach, who saw my talent and watered it and wanted to make sure that I stayed in sport. That's where I discovered running, athletics. Everyone has a sports day story. I also loved other sports. Lacrosse was actually my first love when it comes to sport. I played netball, I played tennis, but the one that stuck was track and field and athletics, you know, literally because I could afford to do it and do it anywhere, but also I, in my head, was a runner for a long time. I would run away from situations. I would run away from things that got too much. And I just love to run. You can't always run, I know, but running became my platform. It became a big part of my identity. I'd probably say until the last 3 years where I've understood that I'm more than just a runner. It was my identity because wherever I went, if I didn't feel like I fitted in or I belonged, I became the runner and made a space for myself. So yeah, very natural part of my story. I started running at school, and George was the one that planted the Olympic seed. And I thought, why not? We can do hard things. Didn't really have too much context of what an Olympics was, but it became the thing that I chased until I got there. Went on to another prestigious boarding school. The girls didn't really like sport there, so just enlisted some boys and chased them, and I like beating the boys, so that was fuel. I would follow my training program. George would send it to me through letters then, actually, because that was back in the day. Again, went on to university. So the education thread is important because my mum did not like me running. She was like, "What is running? I didn't send you to school to run. Read your book." She wanted a lawyer or a doctor, so sorry to be the disappointment. She wasn't really backing me, and that's what also made George's support so important. He had the showdown with my mum and really helped her understand the importance of having a solid education, but also this was my passion and I would really apply myself there. So I made the promise I'd be an excellent student, but also I was going to be excellent at athletics. And for me, that was just getting to the very top, whatever it took. And I call that champion mindset, being willing to do whatever it takes to achieve your goals. And we achieved that. We got to the Olympics, became an elite athlete. I guess it sounds very fairy tale, the first kind of 15 years just making it and having, the first few years in my career, just making championships, getting medals, being a two-time Olympian. But I feel like that's the second half of my struggle, the second battle. When you get to the top, it's staying there. And also all the things that come with the sporting landscape that you just don't get told about. So yeah, 3 years ago, I had that very painful decision to make, which was to step away from athletics and retire. And I guess everyone says reinvent yourself. I feel like it's an extension of myself, and all the things that you kind of put aside willingly to pursue gold. But it's tough because I wasn't prepared. And, I tell a lot of my mentees, start with the end in mind because the one guarantee is that you won't be running forever. And I'm now very happily retired. It's taken 3 painful years to get to this point, reinventing myself. This one I feel like I am inventing myself because I've never been in corporate before. As a corporate babe, me and my friends like to say. And again, it's that exploration. I started in HR. I've recently pivoted into sales. So I think you and I were joking about being like an expert in transition. I really feel like I am, that person. But transitions are not just, job related. I feel like I've navigated so many, and there's so many layers to it. So, I can waffle on, but I'm going to pause there.
Oh, Marilyn, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think I could feel the transitions as you were speaking, starting from that transitional moment, age 10, and then moving through your different schools and then moving into athletics. And obviously there's that initial ascent. And then as you shared, then there's the chapter after it. And then obviously the exit. So much to unpack by way of transitions. I suppose I want to really root into, I suppose, that big seminal moment as the start of our conversation. I have a feeling we're going to navigate through many of these different transitions, but that big seminal moment of making that decision to end your professional athletics career and what that brought up within you. Did you feel grief? Like what was coming up in that moment?
Oh, it's such a good question. I always say retirement happens in 3 stages. So there's kind of like the physical stage where your body says, I've had enough of this. You've been running for 2 decades. Sit down, love. But because I've kind of I'm known as a comeback queen in athletics. Injury is part and parcel of what we do. We're pushing our body physically to its limits. So, I have had so many injuries that have sidelined me, and my goal was to come back. So I don't think I quite listened to the physical side of it. Then there's the logical side. Financial insecurity has been something I've struggled with my whole life. And so it was difficult to let go of sport because that was the thing that kind of came in and helped me. But it was also now the thing that was not very secure and not bringing in much financially. So I knew I needed to come to myself and make a smart decision financially, and establish my financial security and future again. And then the emotional side, which I think everyone deals with differently, and I think it hits them differently. So obviously, what I've described, it's not a like one aha moment. It was actually probably it started about 2 or 3 years prior to the day I actually said, "Hang on a minute, I'm okay. I want to retire. I don't want to do this anymore." And I can remember that moment when I said that to myself, because I think in the few years before, I was worried about what everyone else thought. When I had the aha moment, it was actually, this is just for me. I'm the one that has to get back. I'm the one that has to put myself on the battlefield again. And I just don't want to do that. And I remember nothing, there was no fireworks. I was back home. It was coming up to Christmas 2021, and I was running around Stonebridge and Wembley, and I actually had a good run. I wasn't injured. I wasn't even particularly unfair. I was actually just in my flow, which is what every athlete wants to be in. And I think it's a pivotal time because you're like, am I going to go into indoor season? Am I not? And I remember coming home from my run, and I just said, I don't care if I put my trainers on again. And then I had that moment of, what's everyone going to say? And I said, I actually don't care what everyone's going to say. I am done. And I felt like God was like, you've done enough and it's okay. So I gave myself a couple of months, just because I know sometimes I get excited by certain sessions or certain times I might put down, but it didn't return. I didn't have that, oh, let me go back and let me go and train. In fact, less and less I felt the desire to move at all. And I think what started to creep in then is almost when you allow your body to stop, it lets you know how tired you are. And I just had this exhaustion that just overwhelmed me. Um, and I thought, it's okay. I think to comfort myself, I was like, I'm having a break and I'm not going to make any announcements until I'm, fully sure, which then happened in February. And I wrote a letter to athletics and the community. And I think the responses of that when it was published really helped as a confirmation that it was the right decision, and just met with so much love, even from places I didn't even expect it. Athletics Weekly is like a magazine that you always want to be on the cover for. And, gratefully, I've been on the cover a couple of times, but it's like it's evolved over the years, and obviously now it's online. But I remember, like, you'd go to WH Smith and buy 10 copies when you were on the cover.
Wow.
So it's like a real family magazine. And I, just being able for them to share my story, and then so many people letting me know how my career has impacted their career, athletes, coaches, people I wasn't even aware of. It really was like a big hug. And I was like, part of me was like, why didn't you let me know when I was running and encourage me then? But also equally very grateful. And just to know, I'm very big on what impact you leave behind. And just knowing that mine is a positive one, I was very thankful. And yeah, and then I was like, right, there's a whole new world to explore, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I was just exhausted. I was like, I can't do any of it anytime soon.
And I think what's really interesting about what you shared there is I could feel that, like, the autumn stage of that, like, couple of years where the little, there's little prompts, or, starting to think things through. And then obviously there's that winter phase, and winter calls us into deep rest. So as well, at that ending, then that sort of moment of what's next. Okay. And I had exactly the same thing when I left Formula One. Actually, I had a couple of years where I was thinking, I don't think this is really in alignment, not just this, but the whole of my career, where I've come to. And you mentioned earlier as well around identities being really defined. I was my identity was so defined by my career in entertainment. And I started to search within of, okay, this doesn't feel right. And then I had that moment where it was a bit like you, it was like that lightning bolt of clarity of, yeah, now's your time. You're stepping out of this. And exactly the same that I left Formula One. And I'll take, a couple of months off, that was very purposeful because I knew what I'd done through burning myself out throughout the whole of my career to my body. But then I was like, after that, I was like, no, I just need more rest. And I think that's often the call that we can have in that moment of winter, of death, to actually just sit and be with it for a moment, be in stillness. We don't need to rush.
Yes, be still. That is definitely a word of the last couple of years because I just realized how much in the doing I was and moving and running from here to here to here. And it was almost like I was burnt out 100%, but you get used to pushing through that when you are chasing these championships and everything's riding on your performance. But just being able to be still, one, to kind of understand what was going on. And I don't know if it would have happened. I don't know if it would have worked if it happened in any other way. That the way I was wired, I needed something. I always explain it like I feel like an elephant sat on me and I couldn't move.
Wow.
So I feel like that had to happen that way because that's what would get through to me.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I love that analogy of the elephant.
But the lesson for me is that it doesn't have to be that painful if I look after myself. So it's given me that consciousness, anytime I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed or, this deep, I'm in a bit of a season of that now. So I'm mindful of that and being sure to create those pockets of rest because I know once you're fully burnt out, it's just so hard to get back into your swing. And when I say burnt out, for me, it's lack of motivation, life losing its color. And I just never want to go to those places again. So although it happened that way, the big crash moment, it's made me mindful moving forward and whatever I do to just be kinder to myself and, choose me.
Choose you. That is guidance that we all could take forwards, particularly, because we live in a really unboundaried world. And I can imagine being a professional athlete that it must just be kind of like onto the next. And really, I mean, I could imagine it be as fast paced as, Formula One car kind of speed of just literally just pelting down to the next. And I think that, well, I suppose one question for you is, how have you found this? Because obviously this transition into something that is more boundaried, where you are choosing yourself. Has there been any resistance that you felt to that? I always say, for me, it's old habits die hard. I can definitely fall back into my old kind of grind culture ways. But have you found it difficult, or have you found it easy to step into this new space?
I would say that in the beginning it was really hard because I didn't understand how misunderstood I was going to be. Everyone just thinks of athletes in a certain way. And so I found there was a lot of like myth busting I was doing. How come you even need a new job? Aren't you just running all the time? Well, if I was running all the time, I wouldn't have time to do this job. You're on TV, so, there's just so many myths, and I got really into demystifying these and being a real role model, I like to call it. And I'm not afraid I will share the highs, but I will also make people aware of the pitfalls and the lows, because I think that's where people can really learn. And if anyone can avoid them, then hello, that's good. But I haven't found it too difficult because I was intentional in the spaces that I went into. And so after 15 weeks of applying for jobs, quite aimlessly, I would say, because I needed just something, I was picked up by ACT, who are athlete career transition company and specialists, and they support athletes getting into various companies. And they reached out to a LinkedIn rant that I'm very, very good at, just saying along the lines of, who's going to give me a shot? Like, how can I have experience if no one's willing to give me a chance? And experience is earned over time, right? And they were like, oh, we've got this company that we think you'd be a good fit for. It's a university relations role. And I was like, I've got no clue what any of that means, but chuck me at them.
Wow.
And company culture was something I was, quite curious about, because obviously I'm coming out of the world of sport, which I was feeling a bit bruised and not that safe anymore. So I wanted to make sure I could be in a space where I felt I could be myself. And that was just completely confirmed when I met my first manager, Kelly Kaiser, always shouting her out. She's amazing, a phenomenal, woman in leadership that really champions diverse talent. She champions you, which is like the slogan I like to use. You champion yourself and others. And she knew that I had no experience. She also really respected what I'd done in the field, track and field. And I remember being so nervous for like our first calls and one-to-ones. But even on our first, like what I thought was going to be this big interview, because there was a few rounds, and I was like, oh, this is a proper process. There's more than one round. And she just wanted to know about my career. And she was just so in awe of everything that I'd achieved. And I'm looking at this director and she's telling me about her career. And I'm like, wow, I'm in awe of you too. So that mutual respect automatically put me at ease, because I was like, okay, as athletes, sometimes you're made to feel indebted to people that are helping you all the time. Whereas she was like, no, you are going to be a phenomenal add to this team. What I couldn't see, she could see it, and she was pouring that into me. And I think as someone that's developing talent, that's an incredible skill to have. Because sometimes people think managing people is just telling them tasks and delegating. But she was, first making sure that I felt like I belonged. And we talk a lot about diversity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yes.
Because coming from a completely other background, that was one thing I did not feel I belonged in corporate, and that was expelled because she was like, hey, what do you love? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And how can we help bridge that gap? And she never made me feel like I needed to be stuck in that team. She always talked about career, which was also something that I needed to hear, because I was sharing with you how much I feel stuck in situations sometimes. And, even now she's still such a sounding board and a voice of reason, because one thing she said to me when I first joined is, you're exactly where you need to be in this moment. And then I had a catch up with her. She's based in San Fran, but I had a catch up with her when she came to London a couple of weeks ago. And she said, you've been doing this since you joined Equinix, as in going to the account manager, relationship building role. So just those nuggets of affirmation have been really, really helpful. And then, my kind of champion mindset will kick in, like, come on, I can do hard things. I chose to do this. I absolutely put myself through that interview process. I earned this. So it's a matter of just, level setting and finding the support where I need it, and also time. There's been days where I've been like, it's just going to take time. And as an athlete, time was the center of the universe. It was everything was hanging on. But now I'm no longer an athlete. And I think I have to remember that sometimes. I was joking about culturally, we're not the best at timekeeping. And I know that's something that really irks me. Okay, I can let that bother me, or I can just, chill out about it and use my time effectively. So often when I get there early and I'm waiting an hour for everyone, okay, I can read, or I can just be still.
Yes. I love that. That sort of reframing. And also because these new chapters, they bring this different, like, paradigms in time, sort of that thing of, you don't have to be running like one of the fastest women in the UK or in the world anymore. Exactly. You don't have to be going at that speed anymore. And I love as well where you shared about Kelly and how she really affirmed your value, because I think as well, when we go through big transitions, in particularly career transitions, and particularly for you, what I'm really conscious in your journey is you had such an incredible career, and ultimately that started on a journey at 10. So it's, multiple decades, where, as you shared, that you as a runner, that defined you, your identity. And I think we can have endings and new beginnings and think, oh, I'm in this new space, and forget that we carry all of that worth and all of that value with us. We are not starting from, zero again. We are starting from all of the value, all of the worth that we already hold, and bringing that into this space. So I love that she affirmed that to you, so you wouldn't sort of forget everything you're bringing.
Kelly's awesome. Everyone needs we call her KK. Everyone needs a KK in their lives.
Everyone needs a KK.
But it's true, because I had 15 weeks of rejection, right? So that can actually, I didn't realize at the time because I was just pushing, like, come on, we get back up, we get knocked down, we get back up. But I didn't realize the toll it taken until I landed this role, and I was like, oh, someone said yes. And so that's why it was so powerful what she did, to help, because I had a lot of anxiety when I started. It's almost like you want something so bad and then you get it and you're like, what do I do with it now? And the first 3 months was kind of shaky. Like, it was the first time I was like, I guess imposter syndrome is what they call it. It's the first time I really experienced that. I can't lie. But she helped dispel that really quickly.
Oh, I love that. Everyone needs a KK. And also, I love as well, just to give a shout out, because you mentioned around your impact, your legacy, and you obviously you got that sort of shone, that reflected back to you at your exit from your professional athletics career. And also, you know what I can really feel as well as the legacy of all the imprints of people like you know, as someone to inspire others. And I know you're still doing it in your board work with, is it Athletics England?
UK Athletics
UK
and
Athletics
England
and England
Athletics.
Athletics, yes.
Yeah, so they're two separate boards. I'm the UKA nominated member onto the England Athletics board. So yeah, which is really special to me because obviously UKA are very much on the high performance elite sport, and rightly so. Really, they really support and nurture the talent that's going to go out and really bring home those medals. But England Athletics as a home country is also special to me because I was very much a domestic athlete, the clubs and the community side of it. So I get to kind of have impact across both kind of levels of the sport. And track and field is a sport that goes right from grassroots all the way up to elite sport. And it is tough at the elite stage, but it always starts with that club coach like George.
Yes. I feel like we should give a little bit of time because you light up when you talk about George.
Oh.
Yeah, and I know I was listening to you on a podcast where you mentioned that he died, was it a couple of years ago or?
Yes. So I think January will be 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think I was mentioning, I didn't see him, I was due to see him the December before and I didn't get to, and kind of had an inkling. And then, you hear someone's passed and you're like, oh, someone's so pivotal in my life and he's gone. But coincidentally, I met his granddaughter, who I just know he adores, at a mutual event. I do a lot of talking in the kind of eating disorder space and body image, and Ori Clinic is just an incredible group of guys that I'm working with, and they sponsored this event for the book launch that I wrote a chapter for. And yeah, Olivia just came up and she, you see someone, you're like, I know you, but I don't know why I know you. And immediately she said, I'm George's granddaughter. And I was like, yes, you are. Because the last time would have seen her, she was really young. But she looks just like her mum. And it was like a little piece of George came back to me just for that, that time to just say it's okay. And he's a very special human being. Like he was 91, so he lived an incredible life. In service to others completely, always just helping. On a Saturday training session, he would have 50 or 60 of us out there running up the hills, running around the cricket pitches. He loved what he did and he sewed into people, and no matter how many athletes he had, he cared about every single one of us. And that was completely how I felt. I was so special to George, and he really poured so much into me. And I cannot mention anything to do with athletics without mentioning George and how much he sewed into me, and together we achieved so much.
Oh, I love that. Really honoring George in this moment. I think you shared such beautiful examples where actually people's ripple effects, last long beyond the time when they're gone. I can imagine that everyone who George has helped in athletics, and then that ripple effect of belief in people and their talents, and how then sort of you carry that essence on into everything that you're doing through your mentoring and your board work and everyday life, as well as then when we talked about KK, everyone needs a KK in their life as well. There's a really powerful thread of that ripple effect that we can create, as you shared, around that lasting legacy. I think it's something really powerful that endings aren't your ending, in athletics wasn't that sort of full stop. It was everything that you then carry beyond into this rebirth and new beginning, but also then that imprint and impact, I could imagine, of how you then inspire and continue to inspire other, young women into athletics, so they can see there is a path for me. I can go there.
Yeah, 100%. Individuals like George and KK, I call them destiny helpers. And I think sometimes in life, you feel like, and I'm fortunate enough and privileged to support some people that struggle with really difficult things that happen and trauma. And I always feel like, pain is for a purpose. And, the pain that I felt, it's actually helped me understand or be compassionate to others that have gone through the same or similar. And a lot of the time, the question people ask is, why me? Why am I having to deal with this? But also, what I realized in my time, anytime I asked that question, someone came along and helped me. And there were times where it was difficult to receive that help, but I realized actually this is the solution. I was so fixed on problem solving and I needed to be self-sufficient and do this, but actually there was someone there who was like, hey, you don't have to do this on your own. And I think sometimes we can get stuck in our problems or issues, and life can throw stuff at us. Guaranteed nothing in this life was promised to be easy, but also it's that ability to recognize that there are people that genuinely want to support and want to help, and they can come from absolutely anywhere.
Oh, I love that. The destiny helpers.
Yeah.
I love that, and staying open to
Yeah.
those destiny helpers who might flow
Yeah.
into our lives. Because how did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, where did you and George originally meet? How did that destiny of you two coming together? How did that happen?
I always call it my Cinderella story, although he was my prince in a different way. More like, I was his princess and he was the king. But I had a really maybe trouble, just difficult. I didn't know any different, but I realize now I know different. My childhood was very, very difficult and I didn't really have a childhood. I grew up very quickly and over responsible very, very early. I even had, a lot of moving around, so a lot of kind of inconsistency with homes. Um, Grew up very, very poor. Although, I don't claim that, but, low economic background was where I'm from. Stonebridge was a place where everyone was just trying to survive. Growing up on benefits were normal. Growing up with, you know, loan sharks, what they're called, coming to the door to look for people that are not there because they're hiding. So I was very aware of my poverty, but I also was like, this isn't all life could be. And so at 10 years old, and people often ask me, like, how did you end up going to those boarding schools? Because obviously, notoriously, they cost a lot of money. My dad, who wasn't always around, and we're working on building relationship now. He's always lived in the US. At 10 years old, I'd come out of care and was back living with my mum. I think he felt like the best way he could help me was to send me to boarding school. So I really was just like, I'm going on holiday. That's how it felt because it was so different to what I knew. Um, and I think I just learned kind of code switching very quickly. I was like, this is a chance for me to be, whoever it was. I had a lot of imaginary friends, I think, and I would watch a lot of TV. And so I just felt like this is my chance to, have a happy life. And although, I was always coming back to Stonebridge in the holidays, I also had my siblings and things like that. But when I got to Abbots Hill, which was my first boarding school, one was like in terms of class and things like that, it was not obvious. Like everyone was really down to earth. I could be sitting in a classroom with, you know, a duke or duchess's daughter. I wouldn't know. Everyone just got to accept me. And I remember having a funny conversation with a friend where she said, "Oh, where do you live?" And I was like, "I'm really proud of where I come from." I was like, "I'm from Stonebridge Estate." And she was like, "Oh, wow, how many acres is that?" And I was like, not acres, like, do you mean floors?
Oh,
And, the reality of her life, she was a horse rider. She lived in Berkhamsted and, it was about acres of land. Whereas, so we laugh about it. It's hilarious. But in that moment, I just laughed and I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have. But actually, it's good to be, I'm proud of Brent, the streets that raised me and gave me this resilience that I have. But it also gave me the drive to get up and go after things that people say is not for me, because at the end of the day, I breathe the same oxygen as everyone else. I was in those schools with, especially Stowe, some really like rich people, but what's rich, it's actually what I made of that opportunity. And I did as well as anyone else. I was there to get an education and, enjoy the enrichment of being at boarding school. And I went back in the summer, or sorry, September, to celebrate 50 years of Girls at Stowe. And I got to speak on a panel. And I was sitting amongst some really like accomplished women. And it was really just an honor to be recognized by the school as one of them. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Recognized as one of those accomplished women. And I love that. I can really feel that sense of, you talked about belonging earlier, that sense of belonging that was there. And I think that's really, really beautiful. Now you talk about sort of when you went into athletics, obviously there were challenges, and also it felt like there were different kind of transition moments in your career. And you said you came out quite bruised. And I think,
Yeah.
when we navigate these endings, they can often bring to light that bruising and those things that actually, like the leaves falling from a tree, those leaves that were just like, do you know what, I'm really happy to let that go. So, in your ending of your athletics career, what was it that you were just like really happy to let go of? And perhaps as well, what were the things where you were actually like, do you know what, this hurts that I've got to let go of this now? Because there's always that, multiplicity of some things we're happy to let go of, and some things where, we maybe get FOMO about, or we're like, actually, I really miss this
Yeah.
aspect.
So the things I was happy to drop like ASAP was the lactic acid, the pressure, and the weight of expectation. Yeah, bye. And I think those were also things that at one point were the fuel, my fuel. Like I was like, I want to prove I can do this. I'm one of the best in the world, and bring on, no pain, no gain. And but like in a positive way, like, can my body achieve that? And that fueled me for so long. You told me to get up at 4 o'clock and do 3200s. I was there because there was a chance that it would get me to the Olympics, and I say a chance. That's where my mindset was because I was willing to do whatever it took to achieve the goal, the dream, to achieve like what people say is impossible. And I think that was what made me the athlete that I am. Things that were really hard to let go of was, this might sound so vain, but my body was the biggest transformation. It was My body was just doing the most, and she needed a lot of rest. Yes, I talk about her in third person. But the transformation that happened in my body taught me a lot about how much I needed to control things. And whilst I never try and control others, I needed that sense of control. And what happened when I retired, when I talk about the elephant stopping me, is it was like a hard stop, so that I would deal with things in order to be able to move to the next level in life, because athletics was only one season of life. And what happened in that moment was a lot of things just came flooding back to me, not in any particular order. And I realized over time it was building, because I also fell into a very deep depression, as well as picking up something I wasn't as familiar with, which was anxiety. Maybe I was familiar with the feelings of anxiety, but I just labeled it as nerves, and this is how I feel going. But I look back now at some big competitions where I had not the greatest performance, and I realized actually the anxiety I was just calling it nerves, and actually I needed to do some different techniques to overcome it. But anyway, I had a lot of unprocessed emotions that came back to visit me, and they weren't leaving anytime soon. And I could no longer just, keep running because that's what kept me. It was such a coping mechanism. And a lot of those feelings I would, deal with my body, and or affirm with my body looking a certain way, or, comfort with how my eating habits, or feel accomplished if I was like, okay, I'm gonna suppress this, and I'm gonna, at least my six pack is here, and at least I look good, so I must feel good. So that was a really difficult time to kind of revisit stuff that I struggled with as a teenager, but then through elite sport, I kind of found a way of coping with it, with my body and my mind. And I remember one of the triggering things was that I put on a lot of weight after about 6 months and I didn't fit into my clothes. Now, I guess to look at me, just you wouldn't really be able to tell, but extreme ownerships as athletes. So I knew how much I weighed every single day. Like I just knew. I could tell if I put on a pound here, if I lost 10 kg here. You would know because you're running and your training's giving that feedback. Plus you're going through all these different testings and blah, 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 blah. So when I could not zip up a size 10 dress, I freaked out. I was like, what do you mean? Because it wasn't even a thing where I would even go into shops and do trying on in the shops. I don't do that. I just would pick up, I know this is going to fit. And then I looked at myself and I was like, nah, you look different. Um, and then, culturally, my mum would be like, hey, you look healthy now, healthy, healthy. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? I weigh this. And so that spiral of I was no longer in control. That's where I met with a nutritional therapist, Keisha Thomas, and she was the first Black woman I kind of felt comfortable to talk about my eating habits with. And she was just like, your body is taking control back and she
Wow.
needs to heal. And you have really pushed. And this is actually just healing. And that's one of the reasons why I was so overwhelmingly tired because so much was going on with my hormones and my body was trying to regulate again after years. This isn't just like months, this was years of putting it through like a very grueling lifestyle. So yeah, my body I miss. I miss my friends. And yes, I do still see in part some people from track and field, but your training group was your family. Your every competition you get used to seeing the same faces, even internationally. At the World Athletics final, you're gonna see Elisa from Italy and Alicia from America. It was, you had this community locally and globally that you just knew were going to be there. And then suddenly it's like, I'm not going to any of these competitions. I miss competition. I miss the whole lifestyle, like flying in and going to the hotel. And but now I have to take myself to the hotel. Like what? There was always a car waiting for me. And also I've traveled a lot of places and people are like, do you remember what it's like there? It's like, no, I know the hotel, I know the track. But I miss that. It's like, I guess now my holidays look different. I can actually explore, but I miss the lifestyle, definitely.
Yeah, I think what you shared so profoundly there is that these endings, there's multiple losses. Some things we're happy to let go of and shed, and other things, it does come with sadness. And actually, yeah, for me, when I left Formula One, I talked about this on the podcast before. I grieved, and it was my friend who's an acupuncturist who pointed it out when she put the needles into my lung points.
Yeah.
I screamed, and she's like, "What are you grieving?" And I was like, "Nothing. I'm in the midst of months off of work for the first time in the whole of my career after Formula One." And she's like, "Could you be grieving Formula One?" And I was like, "Oh, I totally am." And that gave me permission then to see it as grief and then to be able to kind of go through that. So I could imagine for you that whole change, because yeah, it's not just a career, even just a career, there's a huge amount, but it's a lifestyle. And it's something that you mentioned around as well, your identity, that you'd always been the runner and that had sort of defined you for so long since you were 10. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so interesting you mentioned that because actually the runner, the athlete, for so long I was so proud of that. Like I was like, yeah, I'm that runner. Until, and this was one of the signs that I was, I guess, nearing retirement. When I lived in America, so I guess the last 5 years of my career I spent in America, or 5 of the last 7 years. And I had a really difficult relationship with my coach out there. And he kept calling me my athlete, referring to me as my athlete. All of us were his athletes. And I really struggled with that. I was like, I'm more than just an athlete. And I think that was the onset of realizing that I was not as fulfilled just training anymore, or, things aren't going well. Like, let's look at reshuffling. But I think part of my nature is to make things work. But I just remember being so triggered every time he used my athlete instead of my name to introduce me. And then when innocent people say, and I say innocent people that, people that don't know me and that is all they know of me, I would be like, oh, it's Marilyn, and I do this, and I do this, and I can do this, and I'm a sister, and I'm a friend. So I think that was kind of the start of the stirrings of, for me particularly, I have never been one-dimensional. I've never been that person that just wants to do one thing. Maybe it's, my my cross to bear, but I've always loved to have multiple things going at the same time. That's how I'm wired. That's how I work. So with my sporting journey, I played other sports, lacrosse, netball, tennis, athletics. Okay, eventually it made sense to pick just athletics, but even then I was 800, 400, 4x4. What else can I try? And so, yeah, towards the end of my athletics career, I think, when I'm looking at advising athletes that are retiring, it's like, it's okay to do other stuff alongside your running, because actually you're more than your sport. And what is your brand? Start thinking about what life will look like beyond sport. So that transition's a little bit smoother.
Oh, I love that, making that transition smoother. And that segues into a question I wanted to ask is just around that. Any advice you share? Obviously, I appreciate, there might be some athletes and professional sports people who are listening to this, but just in general for any listeners, because I know what it's like when your career defines and I think there's seasons in life. And I think what I can hear is there was a certain season in life where it would, it can, like for me, it was through my 20s. That was when my career was really, or myself was really defined by my career in entertainment. Hit 30s and I started to go on the journey of really understanding actually who am I. But if you were to share any advice with listeners or who are perhaps navigating a big transition or starting to think about it, what would you say? How could they make this transition, as you shared, just smoother and kinder to them?
I guess when you're starting to think about it, I just want to let them know it's okay. Because I feel like depending on your sport, there is a bit of a stigma to not wanting to do it anymore. And it's like, it doesn't mean that you're going to retire tomorrow. It's actually you're just being smart and thinking ahead. So my first piece of advice is like, have conversations with as many people as you trust about this is where your head is at. Because one of the things I was afraid of was to let anyone know. But actually in speaking about it, you get so many ideas, and people will introduce you to this person, and this is why I became obsessed with networking, because you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. But one thing I do know is it starts with a conversation. And also, don't put yourself in a box. Like one thing you will hear a lot is transferable skills. So quite often we'll look at a job description, and I'll tell you something, it probably doesn't even look like English, and that's okay. But what also happens as an athlete is we have a CV, right? That equally doesn't make sense to the corporate world. So get a mentor, someone you trust that can help you. One, you can speak to them and ask them all the things that you're too afraid to ask in that other space that you're trying to go into. You can just keep it real with them. But one of the best things, we call her our activator. So I was on the Women's Sports Trust Unlocked program on the onset of my retiring during lockdown. And we were paired up with activators, and I had an awesome lady, you might know her, Claire Parnell. And she was in communications at the time. She still is. I think she's in the NFL now. But she was with netball, and she just helped me with my CV. It was so practical. She was like, here's how we're going to, translate your CV so it makes sense to the corporate world, but also doesn't diminish all the stuff that you've done and actually pulls it out. Now, I'm someone, I had worked a lot, but still you kind of just chuck all your athletic accomplishments to the top. And, but she helped me put out some keywords that, would grab a recruiter. And obviously now working for a few years in talent acquisition and recruitment, I understand what a recruiter is looking for. And often you just need something that will get you on the phone with that recruiter. So sometimes I'm actually just reaching out to the recruiter. Hey, can we have an informal chat? So as athletes, we're quite curious, we're quite direct. Don't be afraid to lead with your natural instincts. And that's what's really helped me in my role now. is that I don't know any other way to be. Of course, you will learn business etiquette and all that stuff, but actually being able to show up authentically as yourself is really, really important because in this day and age, we're looking for people that stand out and are a cultural add, not just someone that's just going to blend in and groupthink. It's competitive as well. So, in a way, justifying your value is that you bring something different. And I know hiring managers and teams love that. Yeah, but with the journey as well of retirement, you're a long time retired. So just don't make any hasty decisions. Make sure you talk to your coach if you feel you can, your teammates, and people from other sports. It was really, really actually comforting. I was in a governance training program with lots of footballers and obviously the Unlocked program. And I was realizing that, hey, I'm not the only person who goes through this because something about when you're in a difficult place mentally, you kind of think you're the only person. And not in a negative way, but you kind of put a bit of a victim hat on, which I 100% did. I just had all this negative emotion towards my governing body. Sometimes when you hear other people's stories, it makes you think, okay, let me just keep the devil that I know, or you're like, it's not that bad, or you have some advice for someone. But there's power in sharing your story, and there's power in hearing other people's stories. So, yeah, just be kind to you, take your time with it, have conversations, and get a mentor. There's some of the key things to start you off.
Oh, Marilyn, I love that. One final question for you before, and then I'll invite you to share anywhere that our listeners can connect with you. But you're now a few years on after retirement. If you were to write a note to yourself at the end of your international athletics career, what would you, from where you're sitting now, say to that past version of yourself?
You will get through this. You will get through this. And I think in a crazy way, I think subconsciously my body was telling me that. But again, like I was sharing with you, the fog of depression, the racing heart of anxiety was really difficult to see past. Um, Particularly the anxiety, I was just not used to it. And whilst I was never suicidal by the grace of God, I just wanted it to end. And it was really hard to see how that was going to end some days. And so my default was like, I'm just going to go to sleep. And I became really like just lethargic every day. But just that comforting, if I could read that note every day, you're going to get through this, it would just help me get through. And I feel like that's what I tried to do. I would set myself something every day to do. I've got my little dog Bentley, who is amazing. Of course, my faith was growing. I would have to say in those moments, my faith was a mustard seed. And the Bible, it tells you that's all it needs to be. And it was very, very weak, but it's like a muscle. It needed to be strengthened. And that process strengthened it all right. But, the practical thing, what you just asked there, if I had a note that just said, you will get through this, that certainty, I would cling on to it. And there'll be some times where I'll be grabbing that more than others. And I think notes are symbolic to me because with my running career, I would have little notes in my spike bag, you know, affirmations, the times I want to run. So they're special little reminders. Note to self.
Yeah, those little notes to self. I love that because that was clearly your future self leaving you these little notes that's affirmations or what time you want to run and
Yeah,
stuff. That's so beautiful. What a powerful
yeah.
practice.
Yes,
Oh
yeah,
my
you will
goodness.
get through this. And I think a lot of us could be comforted by that at certain times.
Yeah, it's amazing actually the amount of episodes where the note to self that other guests have shared is exactly that. You will get through this.
Yeah,
It will all be okay. It will all work
yeah,
out. I think that is
yeah,
such a powerful thing that we can all remind ourselves, that
yeah,
it's a terrifying moment where you're suddenly on the other side of an athletic career and working
yeah,
out what does this new chapter look like. So, I think those
yeah,
are really powerful words that we can all say to ourselves when we're at those thresholds. And that is bringing up a lot by way of anxiety and depression and
yeah,
other things.
yeah. And I think the key word is through because it, you know, implies that you have to navigate something and there is a way. And one thing that I truly believe, because it's true, everything's temporary. So, um, this too shall pass. And what I try and do in those moments is think about a time where the feeling that I'm feeling, I've felt it before. Have I felt this before? If I have, what did I do to navigate that? How did I practically navigate that? If I haven't felt it before, okay, there's an opportunity to learn another weapon to strengthen me. But the biggest thing it also would help me do is ground myself and just take a breath sometime, grab a cup of tea, sit on the couch with Bentley, and this too will pass and we will get through it. And it's a matter of, in that moment, perhaps I'm not as resourced as I need to be, and finding out what that resource would be. And sometimes it was just a call to be still.
Oh, beautiful. So powerful. And you've navigated through the threshold. You are here 3 years on. And as we complete, I just really want to celebrate you, honor you and your journey and the courage. Actually, it takes courage to become an Olympian and to win all those medals. It also takes courage on the other side. And I think, to your point, that's really not reflected in so many industries, in the sports industry and in other areas of entertainment, etc., of that life on the other side. So just honoring you and your courage and everything that you bring into this and you brought into this conversation. And finally, is there anywhere that our listeners can connect with you?
Absolutely. I love a bit of LinkedIn. Also Instagram. I am an Instagram girl. So I do love, again, I mentioned being a real role model, and one of the reasons why that term stuck with me was being accessible to others. And whilst I am intentional, sometimes I won't be on there, but I am very frequently on there and would be delighted if anyone wants to connect. My DMs are wide open. So it's just my name, Marilyn Okoro OLY, which is our nominal letters for when you make the Olympic team, you get some letters. So that's my handle, Marilyn Okoro OLY, on both platforms. I've kind of given the Twitter game up a little bit, got a bit too much, but having arguments with people, so I take myself off there. But I am on there, so if anyone wants to, same thing, same handle.
Love that. I was always wondering what the OLY was, and now I've learned something.
Yeah, so if you are an Olympian, you get Ollie. If you are a Paralympian, you get Polly.
Wow, I learned something new. And I love connecting with you on Instagram because you are so authentically you, and it's such a beautiful glimpse into your life. And I know you also speak to the transitions as well. I've seen some of your posts where you speak about that transition that you've been through.
Yeah. So I think, you and I are going to get our heads together and do some work on my branding, because there's so many things I really have planned. And it has been 3 years of quite intense, just trying to get my head back up out of the sand. And I'm in a place I'm like, okay, what is this legacy? Like, how are we going to solidify it? What is it? How I love serving, and how can I best use everything that I've learned to serve others? So yeah, looking forward to building on it.
Oh, I'm so excited for that conversation, Marilyn. But in the meantime, I am so grateful to you for everything that you've brought into this conversation today. Just such wisdom that we can all take forwards for as we navigate any of those life's transitions, whether those are the ones that we've chosen or the ones that we haven't chosen. So thank you so much, Marilyn.
It's been such a pleasure. I love talking to you, Tanya, and I really appreciate you sharing my story and uplifting me as well.
Oh, back at you, Marilyn.
And thanks to everyone listening. This is what it's all about. So I pray that someone somewhere has taken something from today's conversation.
All of my gratitude to you for joining me for another Dead Conversation. Death on the Daily is edited by David Strutt. The music is Set Free by Katie Gray. And I am Tanya Wilkinson. And if you enjoyed this episode, I would be over the moon if you can rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps me to get the word out there. And if you want to say hi or to hear more about my work as a coach and death doula, including how I support my clients to navigate their death on the daily, then all of the ways that you can connect with me are in the show notes. I'll be back soon with some more Dead Conversations. And in the meantime, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something inside. never make it, and we'll never break.